Hey folks, Chris here from the Crabapple Cottage, along with Iris, my kitty cat, who is in all of my videos pretty much. So I had a special request from Tracy to share with you some of my favorite homesteading and prepping related books. As you've probably seen in many of my videos, I have quite an extensive library. I am a historian and an archaeologist, so I like books. I buy lots of books. But I have a pretty extensive collection of homesteading and prepping books that I wanted to share with you. Now, I cannot claim to have read all of these books. I can't even claim to have read most of these books. But the purpose of a library is to have them as a research resource if you need to, because you can't guarantee that you'll have access to digital formats of knowledge. So a lot of these books I have acquired with the intention of reading them, and I am slowly working my way through them. But more often than not, if I have a particular question, I like to have a book on my shelf so I can go grab that book and answer the question. So I have a lot of books, I'll be honest, quite a few. I've picked up almost all of them at thrift stores, library book sales, garage sales, Ollie's Discount Center, stuff like that. I have purchased some online, but I'm going to go through with you and share with you what I have in all the different categories, as well as which ones I have read, what I liked about them, what I didn't like about them, that sort of thing. All right, so we're going to talk about a lot of different topics because I think that a good prepping homesteading library should cover a lot of different bases. And you heard my dog. I also have, in addition to Iris, I also have a Schnauzer, Ellie. So you might hear or see both of them during the course of this. All right. So to start off with, I think probably one of the most important categories of books that you can have is medical reference books. And probably the two most common or most recommended are these. This is Where There Is No Doctor, a Village Healthcare Handbook, and Where There Is No Dentist. These, a lot of preppers will say, are the first ones you should get because they talk about how to deal with common ailments in a setting where you don't have access to modern medical facilities, if you will. I have not read these all the way through yet. I have browsed them, but they are something that I'm going to be reading in the near future. So Where There Is No Dentist and Where There Is No Doctor. And I think Where There Is No Dentist is particularly helpful because there are a lot of medical texts out there, but not quite as many dental texts. So this is a nice textbook on dental issues for someone who maybe doesn't have medical knowledge. My animals are chasing each other, I don't know if you can hear. All right, I also have a variety of all-purpose medical texts. I have this Wilderness Medicine book, pretty thin book. I haven't had a chance to read this through all the way. I have First Aid for Children, because I do have a son. I have this Essentials of Emergency Care, a refresher for the practicing EMT. And all of these books that I've showed you so far, except for Where There Is No Dentist and Where There Is No Doctor, I have acquired used. So this is an EMT handbook, and I am not an EMT, but this is a really great way to learn emergency medicine as an addition to taking classes, which I have taken first aid CPR classes, but I definitely need refreshers. So I have this book. I also have this older book that I picked up for like 99 cents. Emergency Victim Care. It's kind of outdated, but again, just a good all-purpose medical textbook. So those are your basic how-to books, if you will. I also have a couple of maybe non-traditional medical texts. I have the pill book, which I show off in one of my thrifting videos. This talks about various medications, has a picture guide of various medications. It tells you side effects, what they're used for, interactions, drug interactions, that sort of thing. This is really good if you were to acquire medications that you weren't familiar with. Perhaps I'm thinking in an end of the world scenario where you can get medications from other people's houses or from a pharmacy or something like that, and you need to know how to use them. Maybe just grab a whole bunch of things and you just take them home and try to figure out what to use them for. The pill book is really useful for helping you identify medication and what they're used for. I picked this up at Goodwill. I also picked up this Pocket Dictionary of Medicine, Nursing, and Health Professions. And this basically just is a dictionary that defines medical terms. And that's really good because a lot of these textbooks that I showed you may use medical jargon that you're not familiar with. And so this is just a nice resource to have on hand so you can look up those words and understand what they're talking about. This is definitely for the layperson, right? So somebody who has very little medical knowledge. Again, this was from Goodwill. I also picked up this Merck Manual of Medical Information. So this was, again, a Goodwill purchase. Really great purchase. Has all kinds of medical information in it. So that was another good find. I have this Prescription Alternatives book. This tells you ways to deal with certain ailments, certain conditions, if you don't have access to the standard medications. It talks about some alternative medications, alternative healing methods, diet and exercise, and other types of care that you might be able to provide to help with certain conditions like heart problems and stuff like that. So I did pick that up at Goodwill as well. And then I picked up at Ollie's this How the Body Works. This is just an all-purpose anatomy book that talks about all the different systems of the body. And this is a really good book as sort of just a refresher on the body and how it works, right? If you have very limited medical knowledge, this is probably a good place to start to refresh your mind, like, what are the different systems of the body? How do they operate? What do they need? That sort of thing. I also found at a thrift store shortly after this anatomy textbook, probably from a college course. You can see here I opened it to a really great photo of the muscle, some of the muscles. So again, one of those books that just useful to have to improve your basic anatomy knowledge. So those are sort of the traditional texts that I have on medical care. I also have a pretty extensive library of alternative and herbal remedies. And almost all of them I have gotten from thrift stores. The only one I have purchased is this, The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies, The Healing Power of Plant Medicine by Nicole, I think it's Appalachian. She was on the Discovery, show Alone. She was pretty impressive. I can't remember what her long-term condition was, but she treats it with herbs. So I got this book, and I've again perused it. It's got a lot of information, a lot of pictures, but I haven't read it cover to cover yet. I also have just some all-purpose herbal books. They're not particularly remedies, they're just talking about growing herbs, other uses like culinary, aromatics, that sort of thing. So herb gardening for the Midwest and this book of herbs. Again, these are thrift store finds. And then I picked up a whole stack of herbal remedy books, all of them from thrift stores. So I've got herbs that heal, natural medicine at its best. I've got growing and using the healing herbs. I've got Woman's Book of Healing Herbs. So I'm just going to show them all to you to show you what I have. I just keep picking them up because sometimes they duplicate information, but sometimes they have new information. And they're usually like $1 or $2 each. The Healing Herbs, the ultimate guide to the curative power of nature's medicines. Magic and Medicine of Plants. This is, I think, a Reader's Digest book. But look at those great illustrations of the various plants. And then I have this one, the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Healing Remedies. So this doesn't talk about just herbal remedies. It talks about like Eastern medicine, meditation, massage, acupuncture, all kinds of alternative healing techniques. So that's a really good resource. And you can look up something, like I said before, like on urinary tract infections, and it'll give you all the different types of remedies in all the various cultures. So a really good resource. So those are all the medical texts that I have. I am planning to work with an herbalist this summer. I have a contact of somebody who is willing to work with me. I do have a pretty nice start on an herbal remedy garden. I plant almost exclusively perennial herbs. So when I'm reading these books, if I find something mentioned that I think would be useful, I try to acquire it. I've pretty much tapped out all the local nurseries with herbs, so now I'm having to get seeds of more unusual varieties from online. So that's kind of where I am with that. And although I haven't used them personally yet, I think it's important to have those perennial herbs and those seeds ready to go in case you need them. So that's what I have for medical text. I also have some general all-purpose, what I would call homesteading books, right? So I guess probably the first book I ever got as an adult on homesteading and prepping is The Backyard Homestead. I live on a 1/4 acre, and I wanted to turn my little 1/4 acre, my little village lot, into a somewhat self-sufficient homestead. And the Backyard Homestead is for, I think, a quarter acre. So I purchased this online. Actually, this might be my Christmas gift. And I've read it cover to cover multiple times. It is a good sort of overview of the various aspects of homesteading. It doesn't go into a ton of detail on the various aspects like gardening, herbal remedies, soap making, livestock, bees, fruit trees, all that. But it's a good overview. My pets are going crazy over here. I've also picked up The Weekend Homesteader, a 12-month guide to self-sufficiency. Picked up that. That was, I got that used for 99 cents. Woohoo! The Suburban Micro Farm, another one. Same basic content, but I feel like different authors present information in slightly different ways. And so I think it's always good to have multiple books. And I have read all of those books cover to cover. I also have some basic homesteading country living books. The Encyclopedia of Country Living says the original manual for living off the land and doing it yourself. This one is highly recommended. It's a massive book. Look at that. Everything from like gardening to winemaking to raising goats to making cheese to building a cabin to butchering a pig. I mean, everything. It's kind of like the Foxfire book series, which unfortunately I don't own. I used to own them in a period of simplifying. I got rid of them when I was living in an apartment because I didn't think I'd ever use them, and now I'm kicking myself. So I do need to reacquire the Foxfire books. But this kind of is that type of book. A lot of traditional practices for the homesteader. Really good book to have. I also picked up this Reader's Digest book. This is a little older. Back to Basics: How to Learn and Enjoy Traditional American skills. So again, this covers the same sort of things like how to improve your soil, how to cook over an open fire, how to skin a rabbit, how to, work with wood, all kinds of stuff. So one of those all-purpose kind of books. And then I also picked up this one used. That one was used as well. Little House Living, the Make Your Own Guide to a Frugal, Simple, and Self-Sufficient Life. This has a lot of recipes for like washing detergent and face lotion and things like that you can make with natural ingredients. So a useful book there as well. Okay, so some of my prepping overview books that I have The Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide. I purchased this one online at a recommendation, and I have read it. I think I got it like 2 months ago, and I have read it twice, cover to cover. It's a super easy read, and I highly recommend this book. It goes over everything from security to medical to food storage to everything. It's just rifles and ammunition, how to deal with self-defense, how to forage. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Had to put the dog away. I'm sure the cat will join us because now she'll be bored that she doesn't have her puppy to play with. All right, back to general prepping books. I showed you The Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide. Love that book. Highly recommend it. I also picked up Survival Mom recently online, and it's got some good information, but the voice that she uses is I don't know how to describe it. It's a little flippant. It's just not really my style. I'm trying to read through it. I'm a little over halfway. I'm not enjoying it as much as I thought I would. But I would recommend The Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide over something like this, even if you're a woman. I just find that one to be a lot more interesting and engaging. And then I picked this up at a thrift store. Are You Ready? An in-depth guide to citizen preparedness by FEMA. They probably have, I think this is 2004, so I'm sure there's an updated version of this, and I probably should get my hands on it. You probably could get an online PDF of it, but again, you need the hard copies. So I do have this. It covers everything from like how to survive tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, how to purify water, like all the different methods for purifying water. It talks about things like what to do in the case of nuclear war, nuclear fallout, chemical weapons, all kinds of things. So a really, really great resource. It also talks about like how much food and water you need to stockpile, that sort of thing. So pick up one of these to see what the government recommends. I think a lot of people make fun of preppers, saying, oh, that's never going to happen, you're over the top, you're doomsday, whatever. But the truth of the matter is, the government even tells you that you need to prep. And most people just ignore it. But the government definitely wants you to prep. So pick up a copy of this. Okay, so let's see. What else have I got here to show you? All right, so let's talk about Bushcraft. I do have a number of Bushcraft books. I haven't had the reason to use them. I've got this newer one. I'm so excited I found this one at a thrift store. But Bushcraft 101, A Field Guide to the Art of Wilderness Survival. This is not tying, shelter making, foraging, things like that, how to set traps. I also have a couple of older books that I found at thrift stores. Same basic idea, Skills for Taming the Wilds. And this one is Complete Book of Outdoor Lore that has all kinds of practical tips, shelters, that sort of thing. These are older. Kind of interesting. So I've skimmed through them. I haven't read them cover to cover yet. I also have a number of books on fishing, hunting, trapping, and preparing meat. So I picked this one up at Ollie's for $7.99. I was pretty jazzed about that. This is Outdoor Life's Hunting and Gathering Survival Manual. 221 primitive and wilderness survival skills. So it's got a little bit of everything. It's basically a bushcraft book, but it's got foraging, hunting, trapping, all that sort of thing. So there you go. That's another bushcraft book. Pretty new one. This is again an older version of one. Indiana Outdoors, a guide to wild crops, fishing, and hunting. I keep this kind of with my fishing and hunting books because I think it's one of those skills that I'm weak in. I don't fish or hunt currently. I'm working on those skills. I do a lot of foraging, but I don't do fishing and hunting. So older book. Pick that up at a thrift store. Talking about fishing, I do have 2 books dedicated to fishing. I have Field and Stream's Fishing Guide that I picked up at the library book sale for probably, I think they were like 25 cents or something ridiculous like that. And then this one I did order online, Fishing for Dummies, because this is literally where I'm at with fishing. I'm at the very, very basic level. So, it tells you all about the equipment you need and the different techniques and that sort of thing. So since I'm trying to get into fishing, I have this. I also have fishing tackle. I have poles. I have hooks and bobbers and all that stuff, lures, and I wanted a book to show me how to use them. It's not a skill that I've done yet. I'm trying to learn more about it, but if something were to happen and I needed to learn that skill, I have the resources. I have the tools and equipment, and I have the books or the resources to learn how to do that. So that's the idea of having a prepper or homesteading related library, is that you have those resources available, that you have the knowledge there if you need it. So it's obviously important to read these books, and to practice hands-on these skills, but just having them gets you just one step closer. I also picked up at Ollie's a few weeks ago, The Trapper's Bible, the most complete guide to trapping and hunting tips ever. And this is a reprint of an older book. Pretty cool. It shows you how to set all kinds of snares, deadfalls, traps of all sort, how to catch particular types of animals, what their environment is like, that sort of thing. So a great tool. I also bought this one online, Basic Butchering of Livestock and Game, because this is one of those areas where I felt like I needed to have more resources available, once again, because I'm not a hunter. So I did pick this up that gives you step-by-step instructions and pictures of how to butcher all kinds of critters. And then this one I picked up at a thrift store, Dressing and Cooking Wild Game. Again, this one's nice because it has recipes in it for various types of wild game, but it also has pictures, if I can find them. I can't find them, of actually, butchering a rabbit. Oh, here we go. Shows you step by step in pictures and photographs how to butcher wild game. So those are my hunting and fishing related books. Let's see what else we talk about. Let's talk about gardening. I think if you're a prepper, you should have a garden. If you don't, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's really one of the very first things you need to do. So I do have a garden, a pretty large vegetable garden out back that I am continuing to grow. I also have a dedicated perennial herb garden adjacent to that, and I also have a wide variety of fruit trees and berry canes, so like a mini orchard. So one of the things I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish a mini orchard where you take what would otherwise be full-size trees and you prune them in a certain way and take care of them in a certain way so that they stay small, like 5-6 feet tall. It's called the Grow a Little Fruit Tree method. So I did splurge and pick up that book, the Grow a Little Fruit Tree book by, Ann Ralph. And there's Facebook groups on that, so if you're interested in learning how to keep fruit trees tiny, you can check it out online, or you can check this book out. I'm in the process of reading this because I do have a lot of trees that I've planted that are full-size trees that I'm trying to keep small. So this is a really good reference for that. It's important to note that you should have as many perennial food sources in your backyard, look at that, as you possibly can. I also have this book on backyard composting. I dabble in composting. It's something I want to improve this year. Right now, everything just gets thrown in a pile that has weeds growing on top of it, and I need to turn it and add things to it and do more with it. But this is a good little book. This was again, this was, I think, a library book sale book for 25 cents. You guys, between my cat, my dog, and my 13-year-old, woo, this single mama stays busy. So lots of gardening books. I pick these up all the time. Pretty much anytime I see them at an inexpensive price, I pick them up. So I've got this How to Grow Vegetables and Fruits by the Organic Method. This is an older book. I have Growing Your Own Vegetables. This one was put out by the Department of Agriculture. I have lots of vegetable books. Grown Vegetables, Backyard Harvest, All New Square Foot Gardening, and I have read this book, and I tried the square foot gardening with it. It didn't really resonate with me. I know a lot of people love it. But it wasn't really for me, and I'm thinking about getting rid of it, but I'm keeping it because I think, when you're gardening, it's not really so important to stick to one particular method or another. I think you just do what works best for you, and the square foot gardening method didn't really work well for me, but I still use raised beds, so some aspects of it I do take into consideration. And then, if we don't have access to fertilizers and insecticides and that sort of thing, fungicides, it's good to know how to treat problems with your plants. So I have the Organic Gardener's Handbook of Natural Insect and Disease Control. Again, this was thrifted, thrift store book. Really great find there. As well as Rodale's Garden Problem Solver. Again, tells you how to deal with problems in your garden. So those are really good if you're experiencing blight on your tomatoes or cabbage worms or something like that. You can look up those solutions. And this one I picked up recently at a thrift store as well. How to grow more vegetables than you ever thought possible on less land than you can imagine. So along with that quarter-acre homestead idea, pick that up. All right, let's see, I've showed you those. Let's talk about food preservation. So I water bath can. I've only been doing canning for less than a year, actually. I've been dehydrating foods with a dehydrator for about 2 years. I did get a pressure canner for Christmas that I intend to bust out pretty soon. I think I'm gonna try my hands at some beans and some meat to try to get some stuff out of my freezer. But on that respect, I have a lot of food preservation books. Probably the gold standard in food preservation is the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. So this is what, you should purchase this. If you're a canner and you're just starting out, purchase this. It tells you how to do everything. It has recipes. It tells you times, pressure, for both water bath canning and for pressure canning. This is the gold standard. You definitely need a copy of this in your library. But I also have picked up a lot of other canning books at thrift stores. That is the only one that I have purchased. That is the only one I have purchased. So I have Canning and Freezing. This is an older one, but it's got some interesting recipes. I've got the Amish Canning Cookbook that I picked up recently at a Goodwill. I've got Canning and Preserving for Dummies. So this talks about not just canning, but other types of preserving. And I have this Canning Essentials. This one came from Ollie's, actually, but it wasn't too much. So books with pictures are great. So I did get those. I also picked up Preserving Made Easy, Small Batches and Simple Techniques. This cat, you guys, she's driving me crazy. And the Big Book of Preserving the Harvest, 150 recipes for freezing, canning, drying, and pickling fruits and vegetables. This was a Goodwill find for $1.99. So I did pick up all of those. More specific types of food preservation, I have the Spice and Herb Bible. So this tells you all different types of spices and herbs and how to use them in your food. It's not really medicinal, but how to store them, how to dry them, how to process them, all that. So a good little book to have. I did purchase this one online. I also have the Dehydrator Bible that I purchased online. Again, this tells you not just how to dehydrate various types of fruits and vegetables, making things like leather and jerky, but it also gives you recipes of how to use those dehydrated goods in your cooking. Because that's, I think, where a lot of people stumble. They get going and they start dehydrating all these things, and then they try them in a couple of different recipes, and they don't like the way they reconstitute. They're too chewy, that sort of thing, and so they give up. So this is a really good way to learn how to incorporate some of those ingredients into your cooking. I also highly recommend that you check out Darcy at the Purposeful Pantry. She has a YouTube channel and a Facebook group, and she is a wealth of knowledge on dehydrating, so definitely check that out. I picked up this book, Oven Drying, the Best Way to Preserve Foods. This is how to dehydrate in your oven. This was a thrift store find. Root cellaring, natural cold storage of fruits and vegetables. I do have an old house with an old cellar, and one of the things I want to learn how to do is how to preserve the harvest through the winter without using a dehydrator or a canner, because we may be in a situation where you don't have access to electricity. You can still can, obviously, on a stove, any sort of stove, or even an open fire if you're careful. But you may run out of lids if you don't have Tadler reusable lids or something like that. So root celery is one of those skills that I wanted to learn, so I purchased a book on that. I also purchased a book on canning, freezing, curing, and smoking meat, fish, and game. So I got this particularly because of the smoking and curing aspects, because that's another way that you can preserve your food without modern conveniences. So I did purchase this, and this was a thrift store find, Home Book of Smoke, Cooking, Meat, Fish, and Game. So those are my food preservation books. All right, along the lines of food preservation, I have several cooking books that are specific to homesteading and prepping. I picked this one up for 99 cents at a thrift store the other day, Camp Cooking, Easy Recipes for Camp and Trail. These recipes use shelf-stable goods, a lot of dehydrated goods that you can pack with you if you're a backpacker. So they're lightweight, shelf-stable. It tells you how to cook meals with those ingredients. So this is a great little find for 99 cents. I also have a copy of Hearthside Cooking, which tells you exactly that, how to make various recipes over an open hearth. Could be invaluable in the future. Good kitty. I have Food on the Frontier from 1850 to 1900 with selected recipes. Now this is more of like an entertaining book. It tells you kind of the history of food preservation techniques in the 19th century, but it also has really good information on equipment and techniques and that sort of thing. And it also helps me with my history that I do, my living history. So I have that book. I do have a Lodge Camp Dutch oven, so it came with this little Lodge cookbook, how to cook in a Dutch oven, that I have as well. A couple of old-fashioned cookbooks that I have. I have American Cookery by Amelia Simmons. It's a reprint. This was the first American cookbook. So up to this time, I think this was 1796. So this is published in 1796, and it just gives you really basic recipes like mix a pound of apples with about a fistful of butter. I mean, it's very vague, but it was the first American cookbook because prior to that, people were usually using English cookbooks or French cookbooks to make meals. This cookbook was the first one to talk about things like potatoes and tomatoes, corn, different types of beans, things that are very uniquely American or from the Americas. This book incorporates some of those ingredients. So kind of a fun little book to have. I also have the Martha Washington cookbook. Again, these are early recipes that use a lot of basic ingredients, right? So things that you can probably acquire, you can grow, you can harvest yourself. I also have this book, the brand name recipes Dump Soups. So this is just a lot of soup recipes, which is great, with pictures, because I think every recipe book should have pictures. But it incorporates canned goods, pretty much. So it cites brand names of canned goods like Del Monte, tomatoes and stuff like that. But basically, almost everything in here uses canned goods in the recipe. So a good thing to have in your prepper library so you can find unique ways to cook some of those shelf-stable foods that you may have. I also have a copy of the Encyclopedia of Cooking Skills and Techniques. Again, if you're not a particularly good cook, if you're trying to learn, this will tell you things like, how to whisk an egg, how to knead dough, how to proof yeast, all sorts of things, how to make pasta and let it dry, all kinds of just basic skills. So really good thing to have. Even if you're not a big cook now, you may have to be one if something happens. So it's good to have something like this. And then last but not least, I have just a really nice vintage cookbook. This is Betty Crocker's Picture Cookbook. Some of these older recipes, again, like I said, use real ingredients that are less processed. And so it's good to have something like this just to know how to bake a cake from scratch, for example. All right, so that is my cooking books. I have a lot of other cookbooks, but they're like things for the crock pot and using cake mixes and stuff like that. So not quite as exciting. Let's talk about livestock. So I don't currently have any livestock. I'm hoping to get chickens this spring. I have the start of a chicken coop in my backyard. I'm working on it, trying to find used building materials. So hopefully chickens are coming. So of course I have chicken books. I have lots of chicken books, probably too many chicken books for somebody who actually doesn't have chickens. But I'll just show you a couple of them, some of them that I have. This one's called Keeping Chickens. I picked this up, I think this one was, no, this is Ollie's, $3.99 at Ollie's. We love Ollie's. The Chicken Whisperer's Guide to Keeping Chickens. This is kind of a classic. The Chicken Whisperer's Guide to Zero Waste Chicken Keeping. This is good because it shows you how to kind of keep chickens on a budget, how to use food scraps, foraging, that sort of thing. I have How to Raise Chickens, Everything You Needed to Know. Seriously, guys, too many chicken books. The 4-H Guide to Raising Chickens. This is good because it's for children, and I'm basically at that level with my chicken keeping. I also have a book on rabbits. I don't have rabbits yet. I'm kind of thinking about it. I think the butchering part would be hard for me, which is why you would keep rabbits, or maybe for their poop, fertilizer. But I did pick this up at the library book sale for like 50 cents, so I have it in my library. And I have 2 books on bees. I have Bees and Beekeeping by Roger Morse and Natural Beekeeping by Ross Conrad. Again, these were picked up at thrift stores or library book sales. And I do want bees. I'm trying to wait until my orchard gets well established. My orchard is only a year old. And I don't want to put bees out there until I feel like my garden is going to offer them enough food. I don't want them to have to go too far away to look for sources of food, because I do live in a farming community. And farmers apply pesticides and fungicides and all kinds of nasty stuff to the crops, and I don't want my bees to have to go into the fields to find their food. I want them to try to stay primarily in my yard. So I'm not going to get the bees until I have lots and lots of food for them. So my orchard, my berry canes, my perennials, my herbs, my vegetables, all that stuff. So that's kind of the goal with the bees. Okay, what else have I got? Let's talk about some foraging books. I'm going to have to stretch over here to get to my foraging books. Guys, I have so many books, and you know, I pulled these all off the shelf for you, Tracy, to show you what I have, and then I'm going to have to put them all back and organize them. So probably my favorite foraging book is The Forager's Guide to Wild Foods. Again, this is by Nicole Appelian, I can't remember how to say her name, who was on that TV show Alone. Really great book with lots of pictures. This is a North American version, so really good resource. I haven't read all of it yet. I have perused it. I also picked up these 3 books by well-known forager Samuel Thayer. So he's got a series of books of edible wild plants, and all of them are written by the same person, but they all cover different plants. There's no repeats. So I picked up the whole series. I have The Forager's Harvest. I have Nature's Garden. And I have Incredible Wild Edibles. Again, these are all by Samuel Thayer, and all of them have colored pictures. You need to pick up a book that's got pictures if you're going to be doing any sort of foraging. I have been foraging off and on since I was a child. Actually, when I was a kid, I found a book on foraging in the children's section of the library, and I remember going out and picking dandelion greens and daylily tubers and cattails, and my mom being like, "I'm not eating that crap. I don't know what it is. You're gonna kill me." But that was kind of like a little hobby of mine when I was 12. And I kind of stopped doing it as I became an adult and had adult responsibilities, but I've gotten back into it in the last few years. I do a lot of mushrooms, I do some greens, I do a lot of nuts, acorn flour, that sort of thing. So I'm trying to improve my foraging skills, so I have a lot of books on that. I also picked up The Wild Flavor. This has talks about different foraged foods through the seasons, and has a lot of recipes. That was a thrift store find. Don't you love it when you find books like that at thrift stores? You're just like, how perfect. I have a copy of The Field Guide to Edible Wild Plants, and I've got some pages bookmarked. Again, it's got images in it. This one has been really useful. I've referenced this one a lot. This is 100 Edible Mushrooms with Tested Recipes by Michael Kuo, K-U-O. This is a really good book on mushrooms. And it talks about, it'll tell you like mushrooms that are easy to forage, mushrooms that require more experience. So if you're a newbie, you want to start from the front of the book and stick with the mushrooms that are hard to confuse with poisonous types. And then if you're more advanced, you can go to the back section where they have mushrooms that can be a little tricky. So that is a really great reference if you're into foraging mushrooms. I also picked up then at the library book sale a few months ago, Mushrooming with Confidence. I haven't had a chance to use this book that much, but again, great pictures. Make sure you have pictures in these books. And then I also have this from the thrift store. This was like 69 cents, and this is the tree identification book. I actually want to get more identification books, not just trees and plants, but things like insects too, right? Because sometimes it's, you know, you maybe have a gardening book that's telling you about a particular type of insect, but you're having trouble identifying it. So you need a good guide that talks about insects, birds, mammals, fish. So I am trying to increase my field guides that I have. But this is an older one. What I like about this is that it talks about identifying various trees by a particular part of the tree. So like this shows you all the stems and buds. There's a page in here that shows you how to identify trees. Well, here it is by their leaf. There's another one that talks about how to identify trees by their bark and how to identify trees by their nuts. So nice little resource. Okay, we're getting to the end, guys. Thanks so much for sticking with me. I really wanted to share this. I know there were a couple of you who are interested in what's in my library, so here we go. Some kind of random books that I have. I picked up this book on knots, the directory of knots, at a Goodwill the other day, and it has step-by-step instructions on how to do a lot of variety of knots. That was a really good find, and this was like less than $1. Super jazzed. I also have The Guide to Maple Tapping. Now this book came with a set of maple tapping supplies. I am planning to tap black walnut trees in the next few weeks, actually. So this book came as part of the kit, and I'm in the process of reading this. Obviously, some of it's a little different because I'm not doing maples, I'm doing black walnuts, but still a good guide to have. Let's see here. Crafts. So if you have any interest in crafts like sewing or knitting, make sure you pick up some books. I do know how to sew. I was in 4-H as a child. I did a lot of sewing, but I did pick up a book of sewing, just kind of as a refresher and maybe to teach me skills that I either don't remember or that I never learned because I was a kid and I wasn't quite as into it then. I've got a number of books on knitting and crocheting. I have Knitting Basics. This is from Ollie's. This is nice because it's got a lot of pictures. Again, I'm all about the pictures. Step-by-step instructions. It talks about the basic equipment that you need, needle size, yarn types, all that. This is an older pamphlet, Learn How to Knit. I got that at a thrift store. And then this older one, Knitting and Crocheting Basics. So I got that at a thrift store as well. I also have a book on baskets, making baskets. Again, step-by-step instructions on how to make baskets. So good little reference. And The Complete Soap Maker. I picked this up recently at a thrift store. Okay, so I do have a few more books here that I forgot to mention in the main video, so I just wanted to insert them here. I do have this copy of Bike Repair and Maintenance for Dummies. Both my son and I have bicycles as well as like helmets and pumps and baskets and stuff like that. And so I wanted a book that would give us easy to understand maintenance tips. So I did pick that up online. I also picked up the tool book at Ollie's. This book has describes all sorts of tools and what they're used for, how they work, all that sort of thing. So it's really nice because I have a lot of tools, but there's probably a lot of tools out there that I don't own that would make my life easier. So this is a good way to kind of learn about new tools. And then I also used this new Fix-It-Yourself manual from Reader's Digest. This is an older book. I think it's from the 90s, but it shows you how to do all kinds of things yourself, like basic plumbing, small engine repair, small electrical, furniture, working on furniture, stuff like that. So it's, like I said, it's outdated, so a lot of the appliances and items that they're talking about are outdated, but if we're in a situation where you're having to repair whatever you can find, you know, you may have an old appliance or an old small engine or something like that that you need to work on. Here's how to fix fishing tackle. So yeah, just a nice all-purpose how-to book on how to repair older appliances and objects. All right, I think we only have one more category of books. Oh, no, two. So I have a 13-year-old, sorry, he just had his birthday. And he knows a lot. You know, if we were in a situation where I had to homeschool, there's not a whole lot I would have to teach him, honestly, because he knows his math and reading and writing, and, you know, it would be more practical skills at this stage in the game. But I do have those anatomy textbooks that I showed you. Part of the reason I have those is so that I could teach him basic anatomy, which would be a good skill to have. But I also picked up a dictionary. So if you have children and you think you might need to homeschool, if there were a situation where they could no longer go to school, having a dictionary is a great thing. Like, you know, we just don't even think about it anymore because everybody just looks it up online. But a basic dictionary, and this is a really nice quality dictionary. I got this at Goodwill. I also picked up a world atlas. Again, one of those things that we just look things up on Wikipedia to find out where something is. But, you know, nothing quite like a good old-fashioned atlas to show you where things are located. This one was used. It's a little outdated, but it's not too bad. We'll see what happens with Russia. We may not have the country of Ukraine much longer. We'll see. Well, those are kind of my homeschooling books, but a lot of what he would need to learn would be in the rest of the library. Now, something I do want to add to my preps is a set of encyclopedias, and I can't believe that I'm even thinking this because they take up so much room. I would probably keep them in boxes in my attic or something like that. But when I was growing up, we had a set of encyclopedias. I think we were missing like H or something, so you could never do a report on Haiti. But we would go to the encyclopedia for any report we have, and that would be the place that you started, right? This is before online encyclopedias and the internet. So I'm really thinking it would be useful to have a set of encyclopedias in our preps so that we could look up basic information that we just take for granted we can look up online. They do take up a lot of room. I'm pretty sure I can find them at garage sales. Thrift stores do not carry them anymore. They're so outdated, they just throw them away. But I'm guessing that this summer I can find a set at a garage sale. It's going to be hard to find a set that's kind of modern, maybe no more than 30 years. We'll see, but I think it's an important thing to have for just general knowledge, so I am looking for a set of encyclopedias. Okay, a couple more things I wanted to show you sort of for fun. Like I said, I have a lot of books. You can see that. That's pretty obvious. But where I got my start in prepping and homesteading was in fiction books as a child. So my favorite book as a child was actually My Side of the Mountain. This is my copy of my book that I've had for 40 years or 35 years or whatever. And I actually took notes in the margins. I had a little notebook. Like here, it has an illustration of how we made a fish hook out of a twig. And I remember as a child taking notes from this book about how to survive in the wilderness. I love this book. If your child has any interest in outdoor survival skills, this is an amazing book. There's also, I think, 2 sequels to it. This one is My Side of the Mountain. I think the second one is The Far Side of the Mountain. And this one is, the third one, it's called Frightful's Mountain. Frightful is his falcon that he uses to hunt. I have read the whole series. I have these for my son. Great, great book. Another classic as far as prepping and outdoor survival is Hatchet by Gary Paulson. My son has read it. He loved that book. I don't have a copy of it. I think he may have misplaced it or we got rid of it or something. But this is the sequel to it, actually the third one or the fourth one. So Hatchet is the first book. It's about a boy who is in a plane crash, small little like single engine plane where the pilot dies and he's left by himself, I think in the Canadian wilderness. And then this follow-up book is The River, and then the third book is Brian's Winter, and then this one is Brian's Return. So it's a whole series of books for children. I think a little bit older children because there is some death and that sort of thing, but great series as well. Also, of course, as a child, as a girl, I read the Little House Prairie books. This is my original set of Little House on the Prairie books as well. These have a really, they have their problems. They have their issues with racism and sexism and the way they deal with manifest destiny and all those kind of like troublesome issues. But despite all that, they've got a lot of really interesting information on making your own food and preserving food and how to make how to do maple syrup, how to butcher a pig. I mean, it's not like step-by-step instructions, but it's still a really great resource. So if you have a child, these are geared more towards girls, but if you have a child who is interested in homesteading, this of course is a great series to start with. And I've read the whole series probably 5 times all the way through. I mean, I just would start at one and read them all the way through, and then when I was done, I would go back to the beginning and read them all the way through again. If you're an adult and you want some interesting fiction, there's, One Second After? I can't remember the author of that. That's a really good book on an EMP situation and how people would deal with an EMP. But as far as, more fanciful fiction, I guess, we have Into the Forest by Jean Hagelin. This is good. I'm actually rereading this. It's about a family, 2 girls and their father, and they don't really tell what the crisis is, but there's some situation where the grid goes down and they have to survive. So this is a good little book as well. And then this is kind of like out there, but it's one of those books that I enjoy as a prepper and a homesteader, so you may too. This is the Clan of the Cave Bears series. This is one of the books. I have the whole series. It's called Clan of the Cave Bears by Jean Auel, A-U-E-L. And it's a romance novel, but the main character spends a lot of her time on her own living in the wilderness. So this takes place in Ice Age Europe. So she is hunting and foraging, she is making baskets, she is domesticating wild animals, she is doing natural medicine, she is cooking over a fire, all kinds of things. So if you're into that, and you want something that's kind of fun and has some romance on the side, this is a really good series to read. It's old, I think it came out in the 80s, but I love it. I've read the whole series at least twice through, and I think there's 7 or 8 books. Okay, and last but not least, there are other sources of knowledge out there. I get the Mother Earth News. Here you can see some of my Mother Earth News collection. These are great. These come, I think, every other month. And they have topics, they talk about topics that I wouldn't think about. Like there was an article on not growing, but keeping snails for protein, like escargot, and I wouldn't have ever thought of that. Like, oh yeah, snails are edible. I mean, they're a delicacy in France and other parts of the world, right? And you could totally keep snails in your basement or in a container and use them for protein. So that was a really interesting article that I read in this. So you never know what you're going to find in Mother Earth News. I highly recommend you get a subscription to that. And then last but not least, when you're online and you're coming across bits of information, maybe you're researching something, how to do something specific, print out any references that you find particularly useful. I have started binders. This one, excuse me, has gardening, foraging, and cooking. I have a lot of information on different types of plants. Like these are information on seeds that I've purchased online that are being shipped to me. I printed out information about the seeds, so I keep those in here. I have a lot of edible house plants, so I have information on edible house plants in here. If there are recipes that I find online on how to use like acorn flour or something like that, I print it off and I keep it in a binder. I also have another one for first aid, water purification, safety, and defense. Again, so like different ratios of purifying water, like bleach to water, that sort of thing, different ways and methods of purifying water. I have those printed out in here as well. This is a little description about shotgun shells because I'm a new firearm owner. So all kinds of materials, and these are pretty new. I've just started these. So if you are online and you find a really great resource, print it out. Put it in your binder, put some tabs in there, divide it by topic, and you have another source of information. So I hope this helped you guys. I know I covered a lot of books, and like I said, I haven't read the majority of them. I'm working my way through them, but they're there if I need them, right? If something happens, I have them. I can use them. I think that's the whole key to having a prepping and homesteading library, is to have those resources available if you just can't go to the internet like we're so used to doing. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see some of my more content. You can check back my other videos, and I'll talk to you next time, guys. Thanks.